In today's video, we'll be going over this exercise where we create this overall form where we use two different scale values, and at the end we'll use a sub-D multi-pipe to just finalize it. For this exercise, we'll start with creating a point. And so let's come in here to a new file and let's bring in a construct point. This way, we can, this will be the point that we're going to use. Now, I also like to use a point component. This way we can move this in to any other location. And now we can take this one. Now we'll move this in the X direction. So I'll bring in a move component and also an X unit X direction. The next thing we'll do is the factor. This is going to be the length, half of the length of the structure. So we'll go to 150. And let's move it the other way too. So we could either move this one again in the opposite direction, or we can just double click here, go to a negative component, holding down shift, I can add this to the negative value, and holding down shift, this will add another value going in the negative direction. So now we can move this over, and this will both change both of those at the same time. The next move is going to be, let's just organize this a little bit. The next move is going to be to bring this point up. So now let's bring a move component and move this one up. So rather than going in the X vector, I'll double click here and go to unit Z. This will allow me to move it up. So I'll bring this one and copy the slider. And if you see me doing that one fairly quickly, I slide it over, hold down Alt, and it makes a copy. So I can now use this slider as the height. Now for this next portion, you can use two different, actually three different ones. You can either use interpolated curve, control point curve, so control point, eccentric curve here, line, NURBS curve, that's what it is. And then lastly, an arc 3-point. Now this is actually the one that I'll be using. All of these we can plug in. Here's the thing. To do either one of these, you'll see that we have both points in this component, and we don't. And on this one, we only have one. So we have to separate both of these. So we'll go to list item. When we plug in our geometry, you'll see that now we get the first one, and if we add another one, we'll get the second one. So we have now two outputs that we can do. The first one, then this one, and then this one. Or we could also, if we don't like that one, we can do it this way. This one, and this one. And now notice, since we're using the same connections every time, we can easily just undo this and create a relay here. So unplug these, plug the first one, bring in a relay, bring in the next one, hold down shift, and then bring in the last one. This way, when we preview this, you'll see that we have them all at once. And now all we have to do to change the form is one output into the vertices. The difference is with this one, we do need a point A, B, and C. So this is where we do need to plug those in a separate way. So three different ways. We'll disable preview for these two, and we'll move on with this one and create a set of arrays What we want to do is array them in the Y direction. So go here to move this arc, motion, unit Y, factor. This is what will actually bring in a series of components. Now what series does is it gives us more than one number, so we have 0 to 10 by default. We want to change the step and the count. So the count is how many, step is by how much are we going to step. So if we're going to step 150 and we want to create 20 copies, we can use this in the Y direction to move this one. We can add more spacing. We can add more sections. And we still have our full capabilities for this to be parametric. So now that we have all of these, I will disable the preview on everything back here. So focusing on this here. And now let's bring in a point component or an endpoint component. And this will allow us to now get the endpoint of both of these. Now what I do want is only one side. So we'll just be using the start points. And for this, we'll create a polyline. So when we have a set of points, we can create a polyline. And with this polyline, we can now use that as our attractor line to change this form. Go to point along curve, or point on curve. I always mess that up. Point on curve. This way, we have this midpoint, or this point that we can switch around, and that's going to be what the pattern adjusts to. So we'll take this point, connect it using a line, and we can easily, I'm going to show it this way. Curve in the middle. And I'm going to show how it connects it. So I'm going to connect this midpoint to this point. And this way we can create a start point from here and an end point from here, giving us a different length for each and one of these. What this is going to do is, as you can see, the length of this curve is going to be the shortest and the length of this is going to be the longest. So this one is going to be larger than the one in the middle. And we can easily just create a scale component and see that we can scale these using this factor. Now it's going to be really large, so let's just give it a shot. We'll go to scale. And we will scale all of these curves using the midpoint, or using the start point actually as our center point. And our factor is going to be this one. You can see it's really large. So it's too large. We need to take that factor and divide it. So we'll go to a division because it's taking that length and using it as a factor. So if we use that length divided by 25. And actually, I need to bring in a length component this way. We change this into a length. So this curve length turns it into this length. This divides that value, gives us a smaller number. The way that we can easily change this just using a quick slider. Now this is not ideal in the sense that we actually want to pick a number that is slightly smaller than 1 and slightly larger than 1. So this is where I don't even go this far, and I just delete this one for now, and let's remap the numbers. So in here we have a bunch of values that are larger than 1. Way too big. So we need to change that from very large number to a small number. So this is where we remap the numbers. Now with remap numbers, I like to use, actually it comes in with two different ones. One is bounds, next one is construct domain squared, or construct domain. Now let's plug in the values into the value, into the numbers, the domain goes into the source, and the target becomes what we start and end with. So we want a number that is 0.5 to, or so less than 1.5. This way we have a small number. I'll copy this, and a large number. You don't want it to be exactly 0. That sometimes causes issues. But as you can see now, having the first value be 3000, and now copying this over, saying that the first value is 1.3. And this is what's going to be perfect for our scale, where we can use our center point from all of these using the start point. The geometry is going to be all of these. And the factor will be right here. So now we can disable the preview on this stuff down here and all of these here. Now let's zoom extend. And let's shift this around a little bit. So our curve point, so these are our lines, and this is, we'll preview this one and this one. Okay, so it's reacting to this point, is becoming smaller as it gets closer to that point, and we can change that to be the opposite. Using this as our slider to change the geometry. These will change in height here. We can also change that by, now that we've scaled it this way, we can do another scale, but this time use non-uniform. So we'll use the same inputs. The center one will go into the plane. Geometry will go into this one. And the scale value, we can take these numbers and we can plug them also into the Z value here. So now we've used just that same scale value to change them this way. We can also change them in other ways, in the sense that we only have from 0 to 1.5. So if we wanted to change that, we can take these. I'll copy them down here. And these remap numbers can go into Z value. And this way, it can help do the opposite this way, right? So if it scales it, and then let's go back here. One keeps it the same, and then this way we can have a way larger value. So like 5, and play around with some of this stuff, right? So we can kind of get crazy like this. And then, like I said, do the opposite if we wanted to. And so this is going to be our first value. which means that this is going to determine the initial amount of scale. Oh, but this actually goes into this one. I apologize. So the reason why this one wasn't working is because this has to be our initial scale for the form. And this one, kind of that other amplitude, right? This is using scale twice. One, scale non-uniform, which is just scale this up and down, and then this one scales it up and down to kind of further develop it. So let's take this and now use a Loft component. Now we can loft that together and use that and move this around. We'll take this as our form and we'll subdivide it using isotrim. We'll bring in isotrim. Divide domain squared. We'll plug them into their inputs. So segments goes into domain, loft into surface, this loft into domain. Now it subdivides it by default, 10 and 10, and we can change that if we wanted to. So let's say 15. This way we can disable the preview on all this stuff and focus on subdivisions. Sometimes when you have a number that is 15 and 30, which is 15 times 2 is 30, we can just do 15 and then a multiplication by 2. This way it'll give us an input ready so we can plug that in. Now we can change this, and the proportions of the panels are going to stay the same. And like I said, all of this is still parametric. We can come in here and play around with some of those overall forms. Lastly, I'll bring in the edges. So I'll join this, brep join, flatten the input, and now I'll bring in the brep edges. Now we can use both these outputs and plug them into multi-pipe. Both this one and the interior one, holding down shift. Now we can give it a size. 3.5 for strut size. A little bit too small. And I like to multiply this. So I'll go to multiplication, and if I'm not mistaken, it's this times 5.5. This for node size and offset. Now we can shrink this down. Let's see if we have that ability here. This is where it gets a little bit tricky, because there's it's a bit subtle in the sense that it's hard to figure out the exact connection to get the size correct sometimes with multi-pipe. Now with this, we can kind of work the connection with this one and at the same time a little bit of the size of the strut with this one. There's also a few other things that we can work here, like the segments and size points. Change that. That wasn't it. I think it was this. Well, this has a little bit, some other inputs that I played around with. These are the ones that kind of give me the best results overall, to be honest. So let me know if you have any questions. I'll be putting this on my website under YouTube videos, so you can find the script there. I'll try to optimize this to see if I can put it on the optimized version of the site. And if you have any questions, make sure to let me know. Hopefully you found this useful. Consider subscribing if you haven't already for videos like this one. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.